What's going on YouTube? It's Teej, back again with another video, and today we are redrafting the 2020 NFL Draft. Some things are going to look the exact same, and some things are going to look very, very different to where these players originally went, but that's the fun of the redraft. So as we go throughout today's video, let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. You know, who do you think deserved to be the biggest riser? Who maybe was a first rounder that you think deservedly fell out of the first round in this one? And also, let me know where I was wrong. Who should have gone in the first round of this redraft, and who should I have left out and put someone else in their place for this first round redraft? Let me hear all your thoughts on today's video down below in the comment section. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Hit the like button if you do. Subscribe if you're new and want to help with the channel and see more football content like this if you enjoyed today's video, of course. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. And it's funny, you look at Mock Draft Database, the number one player was Jeff Okudah, and yikes on bikes. This is going to be one of those picks that stays the exact same. Joe Burrow, Cincinnati. If you're a Bengals fan, let me know if you think this was the wrong pick, but if you say that you think that this is the wrong pick, I'm going to probably call you a troll because I can't see in a world where you logically think that. But franchise quarterback, one of the best players in the NFL. I said the number 2 quarterback in the league in my quarterback rankings. You know, maybe it's Josh Allen at 2, him at 3, but at the worst, he's number 3 by a hair behind Josh Allen. So yeah, I'm not changing this one up. Then we get to Washington. I'm going to go quarterback here. I'm going to go Justin Herbert. You know, like Chase Young at the time, that pick made a ton of sense. But that being said, you know, in retrospect, Washington still continuing to struggle with quarterback situations. Could they have changed that had they just bought into Justin Herbert? May not have been the same guy had he gone to Washington. Maybe not developed the same dude because he didn't have, Shane Steichen as his QB coach or his offensive coordinator rather. And, Tyrod Taylor there, who ultimately gets punctured by, his lung punctured by a trainer before week 2. So a lot of things could have changed and broken in a different way. But it is interesting to think if Herbert just stayed the same and you drop him into Washington, how good could the Commanders be? Because the rest of that roster is actually really, really solid. Anyways, let's move on to Detroit now. This was Jeff Okudah, and Okudah is not going to go 3 anymore. Instead, Justin Jefferson. I mean, we go quarterback because it's the most important position in the NFL. But Justin Jefferson to Detroit, and think about where this team would be at right now. Like, say they still had drafted Amon-Ra St. Brown, and it's him plus Justin Jefferson. They probably don't make the move up to get Jameson Williams, in the 2022 NFL draft. But Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown would be insane. Plus, you'd be stealing from a division rival. He's definitely warranted being one of the first 3 players taken off the board, considering he is an absolute superstar. Then we get to the Giants. This was Andrew Thomas in real life. I'm going to give him a better tackle. And Thomas is emerging as one of the best tackles in football. So if you kept this as Andrew Thomas, I am not complaining whatsoever. I just think Wirfs was, he's better from the jump, and he's still maybe slightly better than Andrew Thomas. So, yeah, give me Tristan Wirfs here. He would have to play left tackle, but that was not a problem for him in college. So this one felt like a no-brainer. Again, you could keep it Thomas. I'm not mad either way you spin it. Miami Dolphins. So this was Tua Tagovailoa in real life. We're going to go Jalen Hurts. I mean, a guy who was drafted in the 2nd round, now catapulted into the top 5 of this redraft. And I mean, credit to the Eagles. They're doing their due diligence, still scouting quarterback, even though it felt like Carson Wentz was the guy they had built their franchise around. Now they said, hey, I mean, this is a guy who's worth taking in the right spot, fell into their lap in the 2nd round, and ultimately became the guy that took them to a Super Bowl last year. So great process. Keep taking swings of the bat at quarterback, and it definitely worked out. And you put him in Miami with Mike McDaniels, that offense, those wide receivers, you can put up some scary, crazy good numbers. Then we get to the Chargers here at 6. This was tough because, the top 3 quarterbacks are all gone. You could make this Tua, but that feels like a hard sell for me. I don't know if I can buy into Tua being a top 6 pick in a redraft, especially when, again, Andrew Thomas has emerged as one of the best up-and-coming tackles at football at the time. It was still a need for the Chargers, so you get the chance to address it there with Andrew Thomas. They would, I guess, in this hypothetical world, have to roll out with Tyrod Taylor, which isn't ideal. But hey, you play with the cards you're dealt. You play the board that's falling your way. And I think Andrew Thomas, at this point, better value and a better player than Tua Tagovailoa. Position value, still getting a tackle. May not be quarterback, but it's not too far off in regards to position value. All right, next up, the Carolina Panthers. You could go with one of 2 corners here. I'm going to go with Trayvon Diggs. Terrell was better 2 years ago. 2 years ago, Diggs had the crazy season where he had a bunch of picks, but he also allowed more than 1,000 yards in coverage, a ton of catches, and a ton of touchdowns. Last year, interception number drops, but also his coverage numbers improved, so it was kind of a fair trade-off in my opinion. And Terrell's coming off a down year, so you could say this should be A.J. Terrell. I'll just go with Trayvon Diggs because he was the better player last year. But either way, adding another corner where this was Derek Brown in real life, and Derek Brown's coming off the best year of his career. He's still going to go top half the first round, but Diggs has kind of bloomed into one of the best corners in football and one of the best playmaking corners in football, which I don't think you can underestimate that. All right, then we get to the Arizona Cardinals. This was Isaiah Simmons in real life, but here we're going to go ahead and get our second wide receiver off the board, and that is going to be, where is my guy at? He shouldn't be this low. There he is, CeeDee Lamb. I just skipped over him. CeeDee Lamb is, in my estimation, the second best wide receiver in this draft class so far. T. Higgins is obviously a stud. Michael Pittman Jr., really good player. And we're going to talk about those other wide receivers as we go, but I think CeeDee Lamb, number one guy in Dallas. I think he could easily be the same thing here in Arizona. And had they made this pick, probably a lot more productive than Isaiah Simmons is to this point in his career. You don't make the move for Hollywood Browns. So what does that, number 25 overall pick a couple years ago turn into? And it's DeAndre Hopkins plus CeeDee Lamb. Sign me up for that. Plus Kyler Murray, of course. Would have been a lot of fun, but ultimately they did go defensive side of football. Then we get to the Jags. This is where I'm going to go AJ Terrell and basically just right the wrong of CJ Henderson. Basically get the player that kind of became what they thought CJ Henderson would be. Great man coverage corner. And again, I think he would just be kind of what they were expecting CJ Henderson to be, and Henderson is not going to go in the first round of this redraft. Then we get to the Cleveland Browns. They went Jedrick Wills here. Safety was a need for them at the time, and Antoine Winfield Jr. is such an interesting, flexible, versatile safety that can play nickel corner, you can play free, you can play strong, and you can move him all over the field to where I think if you add him to that Cleveland defense at that time, he'd have been kind of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, but even better and more flexible, and a safety, not a linebacker. But it would be interesting to see, like, if with hindsight, how early does a guy like that go? It's this nickel corner safety hybrid, but a damn good one at that. A little undersized, but I think it's worth having him in the top 10 of this redraft. Then we get to the Jets here at 11. This is where I'm going to have T. Higgins come off the board because, it kind of felt like they were going to go tackle or wide receiver. They ended up going Mekhi Becton. I'm going to have Becton fall a little bit just because injuries have been an issue. And T. Higgins has emerged as, a guy who could easily be a wide receiver one on 20 teams across the league. He just happens to play on a team where he is an awesome 1B behind Jamar Chase. And it is interesting if you dropped him into, this New York current roster, say they still had Garrett Wilson, him, T. Higgins, that would be a scary good duo. But I think the world would play out in a little bit of a different way had they taken Higgins here at 11. All right, then we get to the Raiders. And obviously, this is not going to be Henry Ruggs anymore. Instead, we're going to stick in the wide receiver room. And I'm not even Michael Pittman Jr. Maybe you make the argument this should be Brandon Ayuk, maybe some of the other guys here in this wide receiver class. Maybe it's still Jerry Jeudy if you buy in that upside. I really liked the idea of Jerry Jeudy kind of going to Vegas and kind of being Amari Cooper 2.0. But Michael Pittman Jr. has been a really, really good player. Good size, solid athleticism, great box out ability, good route tree as well, sure hands. And as I thought of him more as a upside as like a 1B. But for the time being, he's been 1A in Indianapolis, and he hasn't been too far out of place. I'd still love to see a 1A there and let him kind of be a T. Higgins to a Jamar Chase. But nevertheless, he's been fine as the one in Indianapolis, and dropping into the Raiders situation where they desperately needed one at the time, they can make for a logical fit. Then we get to San Francisco, and we're going to stick on a wide receiver run here. This is where I'm going to have Brandon Ayuk come off the board. That was also part of the reason I didn't have Ayuk go 12 to the Raiders because I can just go to the next pick. We know how the fit works. It's obviously a pretty good one. He's great with the ball in his hands. He's perfect for Shanahan. Works the slants, works the crossers, and he's gotten better and better with his route running, and his hands in general have gotten better year over year as well in San Francisco. So I wanted to keep him in the Bay Area, so pick him at 13. This was Tristan Wirfs in real life going to Tampa Bay at 14. I'm going to have Mekhi Becton come off the board here. Now, this might be a little early for some in a redraft because it's like, whoa, man, we haven't seen Mekhi Becton play that much. But when we have, he has been pretty damn good. So I'm going to roll with, I think he's going to have a season where he breaks out. I think this is going to be the year where Mekhi Becton kind of puts together, stays healthy, looks like he's in good shape. Now maybe I'm falling for this, yearly cycle with Mekhi Becton where we buy into him, then he gets hurt, and then we're disappointed. Maybe not. I think this is the year where he puts together, and therefore him at 14 here, not a bad, replacement or contingency option for not getting Tristan Wirfs. All right, on to pick 15. A couple of defensive players that went in the top 10. I'm going to have Denver take Derek Brown. They needed a defensive line at the time. Get this guy who's coming off his best season in the NFL, not only as a pass rusher or a run stopper, but he did it in both areas this last year with Carolina. So definitely a guy who feels like he's on the upswing. He was drafted in the top 7 in real life. Here he falls to 15 to Denver. And then for Atlanta, edge obviously been a need that we've talked about with the Falcons for such a long time. That's where I have Chase Young come off the board. Part of it is, a couple of teams here didn't really have a huge needed edge. I mean, they would be happy to take Chase Young at the time, but with retrospect, I don't know if he goes that high. Actually, I'm certain he doesn't go that high because he missed so much time so far in his career. The potential is definitely still there, though. So I want to give him the top half of the first round. Atlanta was a team where it's like, if he fell to 16, I think they would take the shot, even with the knowing of the injury that ended his second year early and kept him off the field for much of his third year. There is still talent in that body because this was a guy that we saw as the next Bosa, the next Myles Garrett, that type of dude. It feels like he thinks he can only win in one way when he has so much athleticism and the size and the strength to win in a variety of ways and really keep tackles guessing. But he just keeps leaning on that inside move. I'd like to see that change this year, and therefore, he could move up when we do another 2020 redraft. But for right now, I think, middle of the first round feels about right. Anyways, let's move on to Dallas. This was CeeDee Lamb in real life. Instead, I'm going to give him a safety, Xavier McKinney. One of my favorite safeties in the NFL. Not a gaudy athlete, but just always in the right place, right time, sure tackler, good instinctual, technically sound coverage player as well. So I think he can do a lot of different things. Free safety, strong safety, flexibility. And again, just one of the best safeties in football. Dallas could use that, and Dallas could still kind of use maybe an upgraded safety. They've been fine with the guys they got, but give them Xavier McKinney, and that's a really awesome secondary. Then we get to Miami here at 18. They actually have 2 picks. We went Jalen Hurts, and now I'm going to give him potentially one of the best running backs, maybe the best running back in the NFL, a guy I'd probably put in the top 3 in my running back rankings. Let's give him to Miami. They could use a running back at the time. Jonathan Taylor would be an awesome addition to that offense, especially if you were to just drop him into the Mike McDaniel offense that eventually kind of made its way to the to South Beach. Jonathan Taylor in that run scheme, oh my God, he'd be putting up some crazy numbers, especially if Jalen Hurts was his quarterback. So we're kind of building a God squad here in Miami in this redraft. Anyways, Vegas Raiders then at pick number 19. This is where I'm going to have Isaiah Simmons come off the board. Some of the same stuff with Chase Young. Like, there is still crazy talent there. And also look at the linebacking situation currently for Vegas. Like, they could have definitely taken a swing of the bat here if he made it this far. And even if Simmons has been the same guy where he's a little disappointing for Arizona, at pick 19, he'd be looked at as like, oh yeah, he's definitely the best option that the Raiders have, and he'd still be probably their best option on the roster. So yeah, no-brainer here, and there's still a ton of upside with Simmons. It just hasn't really come together in Arizona. They're still figuring out his position. As they've kind of tweaked it some, he's gotten a little better. Maybe this is the year where he breaks out. All right, on to the Jacksonville Jaguars. A similar beat here. Jerry Jeudy, yes, he hasn't lived up to the expectations, so I got him falling even further than he did in real life, but the route running ability is still second to none, really, in this draft class. I mean, Justin Jefferson, I got to walk that back. Justin Jefferson's the best route runner in this draft class. And T. Higgins just wins in a different way. Ayuk, yeah, maybe him and Jeudy are in that same league, but I think Jerry Jeudy's still probably a better route runner. And again, Pittman kind of wins with size, physicality, does a little bit of everything. So maybe behind Justin Jefferson, Jerry Jeudy, the best route runner still in this draft class. That's crazy to say. He just needs to clean up the drops. He missed a lot of time with an injury last year. So he's just battling one obstacle after another. So we haven't really gotten to see what the true Jerry Jeudy is. Sean Payton's there now. Hopefully a resurgent Russell Wilson. This should be the year. And if it doesn't happen this year, all right, then the red flag goes up. I'm really concerned about Jerry Jeudy, who was my wide receiver 1 going into this NFL draft, this being the 2020 NFL draft. Next, Philadelphia Eagles. I'm going to give them Cam Curl. They kind of needed a safety at the time, and Cam Curl was a 7th-round pick, but with retrospect, and oh my gosh, where is he at? 255 on the mock draft database big board. My goodness, we were all wrong on Cam Curl. That's not really to throw mock draft database under the bus. He went in the 7th round because that was the perception of him. But he's emerged as one of the best safeties in football. More of a box safety than a free safety, but he can do that. Maybe even, kind of dive into the world of being a slot corner every once in a while. But has proven to be one of the better up-and-coming young safeties in the NFL in Washington. And you give him to Philadelphia, and my, oh my, that secondary gets that much scarier. And then we get to Minnesota here at 22. They also then pick again at 25. They don't get Justin Jefferson in this redraft. But you know what? We'll give him something, not nearly as good, but another intriguing player that I think is warranted going in the first round if I could just find him. There he is, Darnell Mooney. Ton of speed, ton of big playability, and some of the same stuff that people were lauding about Justin Jefferson and saying, oh yeah, well, who'll give Minnesota this? I think a lot of the same stuff could be said about Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney is probably not going to emerge into one of the best wide receivers in football in this situation like Justin Jefferson did, but that's the whole point of a redraft, right? So Mooney as a Justin Jefferson replacement, not a terrible, contingent option fallback piece to kind of fall into their lap. So not too bad to still give Minnesota a wide receiver there. New England then at 23. This is where I kind of feel comfortable with Tua Tagovailoa coming off the board. We were starting to think, what are they going to do at quarterback? This ultimately became the, Cam Newton season. Instead, let's give him Tua. He falls in their lap. He actually does feel like a guy who could run that Bill Belichick, style, that Tom Brady-ish offense to a pretty high level. The question would be, can he avoid the concussions, the injuries, and all the stuff that he has battled? But he's very accurate. Not the strongest arm, but I think that's an offense where they've been able to engineer and make do without. But even from Brady, like, this is definitely a step down to throwing power department and the arm strength department pretty sizably. But I think this was actually one of those landing spots that would have made for an interesting fit. Next up, we get to the New Orleans Saints at 24. A player that went in the second round that I'm going to push all the way into the first round now is Logan Wilson out of Wyoming. Demario Davis has only gotten older and older, and at this point there wasn't Pete Warner on the roster. So this is a chance for New Orleans to draft one of the better up-and-coming young off-ball linebackers, pair him up with Demario Davis, and solidify the middle of that defense. And I think Logan Wilson's earned the opportunity and earned the respect to be considered as a redraft first rounder, which I don't know how much weight that really carries for these guys in their resume. Probably not much, but in my books, it's worth something. Then we get to Minnesota again at 25. So we got Darnell Mooney, and now we're going to follow it up with another guy who went in the second round. But coming off a 15-sack season, it's hard not to put Alex Highsmith in the first round here. Edge was obviously a huge need, and I would argue still kind of is a need for Minnesota. So to draft a guy that becomes a future 15-sack-a-year type of dude who's awesome in those pass rush situations, maybe not great against the run, but can be a designated specialist as a pass rusher, and you can swallow the lumps of him struggling against the run if he's going to give you double-digit sacks year in and year out. And I kind of feel like Highsmith, has emerged into that guy. Now, granted, in Pittsburgh, he does have the advantage of T.J. Watt being on the other side, which certainly helps out a ton. So maybe that plays in the equation. But hey, in Minnesota, he'd have Danielle Hunter still there too, so he'd have some of the same effect, not quite to the same extreme, however. All right, then we get to Miami, and my quest to build the Miami God Squad is in full effect. I can't remember if Michael Onwenu was classified as a tackle in mock draft database or if they were perceiving him as an interior offensive line. I think it was interior offensive line. Here, just give me one quick second. But the pick is going to be Michael Onwenu. In large part because of the position flexibility. He could play some tackle. He could play some guard for this team. There we go. Finally found Onwenu, but he could play interior offensive line. He could play tackle, so that flexibility goes a long way. And also, this Miami offensive line, especially this time, was really rough. But even to this day, could use another left guard. That's why they signed Isaiah Wynn. They could use another right tackle. We'll see if Austin Jackson breaks out. That's why, Onwenu feels like the guy, if I could redraft it, to plug a future hole in advance. But you also could go Robert Hunt here, who makes a ton of sense for that team, and keep him in Miami. Then we get to Seattle at 27. I'm going to go with Josh Uche here. Now, granted, this is a pick where I'm kind of taking him solely as a specialist because that's kind of how New England uses him. But as a, sub-package, pass rush specialist as an edge, he has been awesome. He's been one of the best, specialist pass rushers in the NFL, and he's made that defense in New England a whole lot better because of it. So Seattle, don't know how much you'd be getting out of him as a run defender, but in this, hypothetical world, he'd easily be the guy who I look at as the best pass rusher on that roster if, we assume that he played the same, he was the same player, and was still on that roster. I'd take him over Chandler Nwosu, I'd take him over Derek Taylor pretty comfortably. And then we'll see what Boye Mafe and Derek Hall kind of emerge into, and maybe they become players better than Uche. Then we get to Baltimore at 28. This is where I'm going to have Robert Hunt come off the board. Hunt's definitely earned the respect of being a redraft first rounder. Had a touchdown stolen away from him on Thursday Night Football. Still thinking about that. But jokes aside, yeah. Great in the run game, pretty solid pass protector, played guard, played tackle. Not much that Robert Hunt hasn't been asked to do where he hasn't really played really good football. So, yeah, and I also think he'd be a great scheme fit in that block, that gap blocking scheme in Baltimore. I actually think he'd be awesome as a Raven. All right, next up, the Tennessee Titans. This was the draft where they took Isaiah Wilson. So, Jedrick Wills hasn't been totally awesome. He hasn't lived up to being, one of the first tackles taken off the board, top 10 pick or anything like that. But he's still in the league, and that's more than we can say about Isaiah Wilson. So let's definitely go with Jedrick Wills here, and let's get ahead of a potential tackle need that's going to come and that we know is going to come for the Titans by drafting Wills here. And it is interesting to think, if Isaiah Wilson worked out or they just took a different tackle there, how big of an offensive line need would we have had this past offseason with the Titans? How much could that one pick have just changed the future asset, need going into the 2023 draft? It is kind of an interesting what-if scenario to run through in your head. Then we get to the Green Bay Packers. I'm not going to have Jeff Okudah or CJ Henderson in the first round. Jalen Johnson's battled injuries, but when we've gotten to see him, I think he's played better than those other two guys. So that's kind of what's moving me in that direction. There's some other guys that aren't going to be in the first round, like Grant Delpit, like Jeremy Chin, that you could make an argument they should go here. And one of the next two guys that I'm going to take off the board, actually, I'm going to take him 2 picks from now, but L'Jarius Sneed, I'm going to have him stay in Kansas City at 32. He could be the option here too. So I just think Johnson's played better than Okudah and Henderson to this point, but I could also see where this is the year Okudah kind of figures it out, and Jalen Johnson continues battles with injuries, and maybe that changes a little bit. But anyways, San Francisco, I'm going to stick at the safety position and go Kyle Duggar. He's coming off the best season of his career. Great against the run, good tackler, good in coverage. I just loved him a ton coming out of a small school. And now that we've seen that small school to NFL transition, I feel comfortable putting him in the first round of this redraft. And especially if you dropped him into that secondary right now, he'd be the best safety that they have right now in San Francisco. And as previously alluded to, I'm going to give Kansas City L'Jarius Sneed because he's been such a good player for them and such a great Spagnuolo fit, right? So let's just keep him in Kansas City, and I think he's played well enough to garner the first round consideration in the 2020 redraft. So we'll scroll through one more time so you all can see each and every pick. We start with a couple of quarterbacks, then a couple more superstars with Justin Jefferson and Tristan Wirfs. Round of the top 10 with AJ Terrell, Antoine Winfield Jr. Just before we get a run on wide receiver with Higgins, Michael Pittman Jr., Brandon Ayuk. Then we get into the 20s, Judy, Curl, Mooney, Tua. What do you think about all those picks? Uche, Hunt, Wills. And then we round it out with Jalen Johnson, Kyle Duggar, L'Jarius Sneed, a little bit of a secondary run to cap us off. But let me hear your thoughts down below in the comments section. Where was I right? Where was I wrong? What first rounders should have been included in this redraft, or who should have been moved in the first round in this redraft, and who ultimately did I put in this first round that you think, no, they're not quite there just yet. Keep them out and put this other person in. Love to hear all your thoughts down below in the comments section on this 2020 NFL redraft. Like if you guys enjoyed today's video. Subscribe if you're new and want to see more football content like this. But that is going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I am signing off.